I am New York.
Ya some New York.
I am New York.
Yo soy Nueva York.
Sono New York.
Je suis New York.
Welcome to Diverse City, where we explore New York's eclectic enclaves, one neighborhood at a time. I'm Zyphus Lebrun. This month, we're heading to Port Richmond and neighboring West New Brighton on Staten Island's more diverse North Shore. Once an independent village, Port Richmond is one of the island's oldest neighborhoods. It's bordered to the north by the Kilvan-Cull Waterway that was once a major port of economic prosperity for the area. The neighborhood is majority middle-class white, with a significant Hispanic, particularly Puerto Rican and Mexican population, followed by African Americans. The area's got some connections to American history that stretch all the way to the White House. Lately, the district is developing a dubious reputation for shootings. On this episode, True to Life, former felons now on the right side of the law push back against increased incidents of gun violence. Port Richmond strong, tensions brew over competing visions for the future of a once vibrant thoroughfare. And bring back the boats, the effort to return the area's maritime industry to its heyday. Those stories and more coming up as we explore Port Richmond and West New Brighton on Staten Island. The grassroots organization True to Life is employing former felons as part of a public health approach to addressing the increasing number of shooting deaths in Port Richmond and surrounding areas. I found out a little more about the Cure Violence method, its efficacy, and why there's still some resistance to it.
Say stop the gun violence! Stop the gun violence! I said stop the gun violence!
The man with the megaphone is Malcolm White. He is a credible messenger with an anti-gun violence organization in Port Richmond called True to Life. The organization is part of the New York City crisis management system. They see shootings as a public health issue.
The cure to that disease is to help change mindsets. And the first part of changing mindsets is to interrupt a situation. So how that interruption happens is if two individuals are having some type of conflict and we know one side or both sides of the parties, all we need to do is know one side of the party, have an in-way with one side of the party. We can then go in and mediate the situation.
After nearly 2 years of relative quiet, White and the rest of the 12-person True to Life team have been dealing with a spike in brazen killings that's got the attention of local politicians.
We're standing here on the corner where a young man in our community was killed in broad daylight. Less than 48 hours, 3 young men have died as a result of gun violence in our neighborhood. Shootings in Staten Island are up by 110% this year compared to 2019.
That's a higher percentage than the 76% increase the NYPD reports for the city as a whole. What it means in real numbers is that the 121st Precinct has reported 15 shooting victims through November 1st of this year, compared to 6 for the same period last year. Though crime statistics do traditionally spike during the warmer months, Felix Polanco has another idea as to what's caused the higher numbers.
90% of the time when we get into the hospital, we're able to prevent a retaliation from occurring and leaking outside of the hospital. So as a result of COVID, we weren't allowed to go inside of the hospital. And then we saw a spike in Staten Island. We started seeing numbers that we haven't seen in a long time.
Polanco is also a violence interrupter with True to Life. A lot of his work is done in the halls of Richmond University Medical Center, or RUMC, which sees the majority of gunshot victims on Staten Island.
Richmond University Medical Center sees about 85 to 90% of all the penetrating trauma on Staten Island. So having a resource like this and having these hospital responders who either have experienced this type of violent act in the past, that have an understanding of it, not just from the clinical side that we can take care of, but from the mental aspect side.
The Cure Violence method of dealing with shootings is not new. It was actually developed by Dr. Gary Slutkin, an epidemiologist and professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago back in 1995. It's been implemented by different groups around the country in gun violence-ravaged areas in New Orleans and Chicago. But experts like John Jay's Dr. Jeffrey Butts say it's hard to prove the efficacy of this cure violence method.
It's a challenge to have something that produces a meaningful effect, but it may not be statistically significant. And because of that, these community-based programs tend to lose out to policing and therapeutic programs, and just because of the nature of evaluation research. And that is a challenge for this model, for this public health model.
Dr. Butts also says that the notion of a credible messenger is frightening to donors, police, and legislators who may not trust or find it too expensive to pay and train former felons like Polanco and White. White served 2 jail terms, one for armed robbery and the other on drug charges.
I have experiences from going to prison that I could share with these young brothers that can help them to maybe not go to prison. Maybe it was in my destiny to go to prison. So I could let the young brother know that, yo, that's not where you want to be. You want me to tell you what they're doing in there? Because I could tell you, I've been there.
Polanco, who served time for drug dealing, admits that he initially had to get over his trauma with the NYPD. He says they now have a good working relationship.
It was an uphill battle. But right now, I feel like we're in a good space. And now our relationship with them is that if we need statistical data of where, the violence is spiking, or, where the violence is just like out of control, we can get on the phone with the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice and get the data from them, so we know how to position our staff to try to prevent anything from, increasing.
During a recent meeting at police headquarters, NYPD Chief of Department Terrence Monahan talked about the need to work ever closer with such groups. Dr. Butts says that this sort of relationship is key to addressing gun violence at a time when lawmakers are looking for alternatives to conventional policing. The issue has been more prevalent since the social uprising of this last spring, brought on by George Floyd's death and the subsequent calls to defund the police.
I think there is greater receptivity right now to alternatives to the public health approach, but it is a struggle to get funded. In New York City, I've heard people in the city government wonder, is it really wise for us to be spending over $10 million a year on these programs, these credible messengers, these neighborhood-based? And I think 10 million, you spend almost $6 billion on NYPD. Now, a lot of that I'm sure is perfectly justified, but when you're going to be comparing the level of investment, isn't it worth it to maybe one day not have to spend $6 billion on policing because you built these strong communities with these neighborhood-based organizations that can protect public safety far more effectively and cheaper?
Port Richmond Avenue has been through a lot. The once bustling commercial thoroughfare fell into decline in the 1970s when the Staten Island Mall was built. Since then, Mexican immigrants have revived the area, dotting it with businesses. But there's a conflict of visions over the strip. A new civic group is fighting the rise of potential homeless shelters and low-income housing, while an older non-profit says low-income housing is what's needed. Shannon Ayala has that story.
From Ralph's famous Italian ices down to the gritty waterfront, Port Richmond Avenue is a low-key but active main drag with the kind of stuff you'd find on any downtown street. Bars, hair salons, churches, and in this case, a lot of Mexican food spots. But Mario Buonviago, a lifelong Port Richmond resident, is nostalgic for when the street was a bigger deal.
The Port Richmond Avenue, the business corridor, as we call it, it was Staten Island's original shopping district.
Buonviago is a member of Port Richmond Strong Civic Association. The organization cropped up in 2018 when 2 permits were filed for boutique hotels on the avenue.
The shopping district is what it's supposed to be. It's what it's for. It's for shopping, not to have apartments or a hotel, maybe a hotel decades down the road after a vibrant business model is established. But putting a hotel there is equivalent to putting the carriage before the horse.
That was only part of their resistance to the idea. They say that their research revealed the developer likely had a not-so-obvious agenda.
They never turn into hotels. They turn into some type of transient shelter for people coming out of prison or people coming out of some type of mental health facility and being redirected there to some type of housing.
So far, Buenviago says, only one of the hotel applications has been approved and there's no construction yet. The group has since broadened its purpose, like holding an award ceremony in a church. But during the pandemic, storefront vacancy on the avenue has risen from 12 to 20%. And recently, Port Richmond Strong has also taken issue with an affordable housing development underway on the Strip.
It's on a commercial district, an area where it should be consumed with consumer products, restaurants, clothing, hardware store. That should be the main focus of the area, not some type of housing.
The housing in this case would be 47 below market rate studio apartments, including supportive housing. It's run by Project Hospitality, a North Shore nonprofit group that's been serving the Mexican immigrant population and addressing homelessness in Port Richmond for decades. Its president and CEO, the Reverend Dr. Terry Troya, also a North Shore native, says this housing is urgently needed.
Post-COVID, the homeless situation in Port Richmond is about 3 times worse than it was 2 years ago, a year ago.
Some opponents of the project say there are no homeless people directly in Port Richmond. City statistics from 2019 show the borough had a homeless population of 1,300. Dr. Troya says in Port Richmond, they are just not obvious.
Right now, there's about 12 men who sleep in and around the area outside my office. There are men that sleep underneath the train trestle. There are men that sleep in cemeteries. There are men that sleep in a granite quarry. There are men that sleep behind the gas station with the owner's permission. It's really tough going. These are men that are working and still homeless because they could not, in their wildest dreams, afford a studio for $1,900.
Dr. Troya also insists, despite what some say, the project is meant for local Staten Islanders.
The proposal we have, because it's not easy building affordable housing, is a mixed model of housing. It's supportive housing for homeless Staten Islanders. That's people who have gone through our ranks, have come in through our shelter, have been supported by Project Hospitality, and whom we believe would thrive in their own apartment.
Buenviago says he's not against what the nonprofit stands for, or social services outright.
Let's make no mistake, Project Hospitality does great work. They do help people. My family has been involved with Project Hospitality way before people today know of Project Hospitality.
But Buenviago says there are too many social services clustered in the neighborhood, and that's bad for business.
But when you have 17 or 19 less than 1.25 miles from each other, there's no room for any other type of businesses to come in.
Dr. Troya sees it differently.
Do we ever ask the question, are there too many houses of worship in a community? Are there too many restaurants? Are there too many bars? Housing is not a social service. Affordable housing is affordable housing.
Dr. Troya says the exact location worked out because Project Hospitality already owned the property and that the ground level storefront will be a job placement center. Buenviago says he's considering creating a business improvement district to push forward his vision of a bustling business corridor once again. This is Shannon Ayala for Diverse City.
The maritime industry used to have a major presence in Port Richmond and neighboring Mariners Harbor. At one time, there were thousands of workers repairing and building ships and working in various other jobs related to the waterways. But that's since declined as work and boats have moved to different parts of New York Harbor. Craig Thompson reports on the effort to bring back the boats.
An inaccessible waterfront, walled off from the community. What was once a prominent maritime industry is now a shadow of its former self.
There was tens of thousands of people working, but most of them left New York when the Coast Guard left. Was a lot of boats here. So now this boat is not here anymore. All went to Virginia. So even the subcontractors who was here just left New York and went to Virginia.
Mohammed Adam, who's owned and operated May's Ship Repair on Richmond Terrace for 40 years, has seen the maritime workforce fall off since its peak in the 1990s.
Started the shipyard, there was about 16, 17 shipyards in New York and Brooklyn, and right now there's only 3 lifts.
The western North Shore of Staten Island is part of the larger port industry that stretches from Port Newark in New Jersey down through the Kill Van Kull and through to the freight operations in South Brooklyn and the cruise operations in Red Hook. It is the second largest container port in the U.S., with approximately 45,000 jobs associated with the industry in New York City. But even with Port Richmond and Mariners Harbor right in the middle of the Kill Van Kull and the recently raised Bayonne Bridge hanging over the neighborhood, the waterfront community does not have a vibrant maritime workforce the way it once did.
It does seem that for some reason, the maritime industry happens in isolation of the community that lives there. Junkyard that's walled off. There's, automotive sales. There's automotive repair shops, storage facilities there. So that's all just, not inviting to the public.
This is a far cry from investments to the maritime industry made in other parts of New York.
If you look at the investments the city has made in South Brooklyn in terms of, the terminals there, how that is really supporting and driving the local economy, I think those opportunities can exist on Staten Island as well.
Jasmine Cardona, Executive Director of the Division of Economic Development, Continuing Studies and Government Relations at the College of Staten Island, thinks training will be a key to bringing back life to the waterfront and the maritime industry.
I think that our young people do not have a keen understanding of the availability of jobs and the opportunities. I think that is a huge part of the work that we have to do is start to bring education and awareness around those employment opportunities outside of your typical port jobs. I think many folks don't know that there are plenty of opportunities for college graduates. You talk about management opportunities, you talk about supply chain management. But it runs the gamut. It's not isolated to just the port jobs, is that the port jobs then bring in the opportunity for these other jobs to become available to the community.
For the last 4 years, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey has reached out to the community to make people aware of the jobs available.
When you think about May Ship Repair, when you think about Cadell's Dry Dock, when you think about Moran and McAllister with their tugboats, there are a lot of different jobs that are available as seafarers, as dispatchers, as line handlers, as supply delivery companies. So again, one of the things that we first did with the CPP, the Council on Port Performance, was to create a brochure of all of the different types of jobs that are available, because if you don't know it, you don't know it.
In her role as Deputy Director of the Port Department of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, Beth Ann Rooney has directed outreach to the high schools and middle schools in Port Richmond, hoping to find a new generation of maritime workers.
The onus is on us even more collectively as the maritime community to make sure that we do provide visibility and knowledge and access so that there is a pipeline of workers.
According to a 2019 New York City Economic Development Corporation survey, 75% of maritime employers said it was very difficult or impossible to find skilled labor. This is something Mohammed Adam can attest to.
I love to see the people, the community we have, most of them work here.
One way to do this is through training in the schools and colleges, like Port Richmond High School.
What we're trying to do is bring education and awareness around these opportunities. The jobs that are highly sought after are the union jobs. And so a lot of the work that we're doing with the steering committee is making sure that the unions are coming into the community, talking to students, talking to the community about those opportunities.
Mohammed Adam is even willing to use May Ship Repair as a place to train a new generation of welders, ship fitters, and technicians.
We like to see the colleges and graduating people in this field. We're here if they want us to use us as a lab. We're not looking for money, we're not looking for anything. Just come and we'll train you.
For Diverse City, I'm Craig Thompson.
You just heard about the effort to bring back the island's maritime sector. Now, Vanessa Monet explores part of that history with a look at a New Brighton cultural gem that served several sailors over the years.
Known to locals for its sprawling gardens and the occasional festival, Sailor's Snug Harbor has a history that is hidden in the plain sight of its very name.
Sailor's Snug Harbor was the first institution of its kind in America that offered free room and board, and it was accessible to anyone who fit the basic requirements, regardless of your ethnicity, your religion, race. You were able to apply, go through the process.
Megan Beck is the curator of the Noble Maritime Collection, a museum located on the grounds of Sailor's Snug Harbor, dedicated to the works of John A. Noble, a local American artist whose work focused on the maritime industry.
The point was for any sailor, as long as you served at least 5 years under an American flag ship if you were American, or 10 years if you were foreign born under an American flag, you could come here and live for free room and board, free medical care.
The museum's current exhibit, Daily Life at Sailor's Snug Harbor, showcases the beginnings of this cultural institution.
Sailor's Snug Harbor was founded in 1801 by the will of Robert Richard Randall, who was from a very prominent philanthropist maritime family. All of his money came from seafaring adventures, and he wanted to return that to the people who really toiled on the sea. So he left all of his money in his estate, which was in Lower Manhattan, kind of where Washington Square Park is today. And he wanted his estate turned into a home for aged, decrepit, and worn-out sailors.
They opted to build the home on Staten Island, where land was cheaper. The original Randall estate in Lower Manhattan was rented out to fund ongoing philanthropic causes. In 1833, Sailor's Snug Harbor opened on what was originally over 120 acres of farmland.
It was a beautiful campus with Greek Revival buildings and top-rate, medical care, and there was a farm on site, so it was largely self-sustaining, and it's right on the water. Over the course of its history here on Staten Island, about 10,000 sailors lived here. At the turn of the 19th, 20th century, about 1,000 people were here at once. That was the peak. So there were 7 dormitory buildings at that time to fit all those people.
So what did the retired sailors do as they lived out their remaining years on the campus?
Here at the harbor, sailors were encouraged to stay active. And actually, they were expected, if they were able, to have some sort of a job here on site to help the whole site run smoothly. But they were also encouraged to stay as active as possible. So a lot of them made handicrafts, macrame bags, or ship models in a bottle. And they were encouraged to sell them for extra money, because Sailor's Snug Harbor existed because there weren't pensions the way we know them today.
It would be a formal pension system that ultimately brought about the end to the Home for Sailors on Staten Island.
Sailor's Snug Harbor had its peak about 1900, and then by the 1940s, with Social Security and some other government pension programs, people didn't need this home in the same way they had needed it in the century prior. So sailors who were retiring in the 40s or the 50s, they had money from their own shipping companies. Pensions started just to become a typical thing, and they had help from the government.
By the early 1950s, many of the buildings on site were facing disuse and were torn down. That led the trustees of Sailor's Snug Harbor to make the decision to move the home to North Carolina.
They sold off some of the property here to the city of New York, but 62 acres were going to be sold to developers, and everything was going to be knocked down and turned into apartments. And people were furious in the surrounding area. So there was a lot of people who came together to fight to save the harbor. One of them was John Noble. He lived just down the block, and he wrote essays to the mayor and to all the papers, and just trying to get people to understand that what this place meant, not just to the maritime community, but to the whole local community. By 1973, it was sold to the city of New York for like a ceremonial $1 and designated as parkland. And then by 1976, the sailors moved to North Carolina, the home moved down there, and the site was designated a cultural institution.
Over time, Sailor Snug Harbor's beginnings faded from memory, and a whole generation is now seemingly unaware of the rich history of these grounds. But Beck and the team at the Noble Maritime Collection are hoping to change that. For Diverse City, I'm Vanessa Monet.
That's our look at Port Richmond and West New Brighton on Staten Island. Join us next month when we'll take a look back at 2020. Till then, thanks for joining us as we explore our diverse city.